So welcome to our last synchronous class of the semester for International Affairs 283 Social Entrepreneurship. We are joined by some esteemed social entrepreneur guests this evening. Before we let them introduce themselves and get into a panel discussion, I wanted to open it up and see if anybody had any questions about the final assignments for the semester, how to submit them, or any other housekeeping items to go over before we dive into the panel. All right, I feel like y'all are ready to rock. We have three amazing social entrepreneurs joining us tonight. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I've got a series of questions to run through. Also, absolutely want to make this interactive. So if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. At any point, we can chime in and kind of riff on that or type questions in the chat, and we'll get to them as quick as we can. And so without any further ado, Miss Erica Cole, I would love to welcome you to the stage and share with the class a little bit of your origin story, any, exciting, small news, maybe big news that's happened in the past couple of weeks, and just share a brief overview of the work you're doing at No Limits.
Sure, thanks, Mike. So my name is Erica. I founded a company called No Limits, but it's spelled No, Limbits. So my background, I was actually in a car accident in 2018 and became an amputee. Struggled with my clothing for a while, and long story short, decided to do something about it and start an adaptive clothing line. So our first line is a pair of jeans made specifically for amputees, and then we have some sensory friendly and some wheelchair friendly clothing in development also. We launched a Kickstarter last week that was fully funded in a week, so that was super exciting. Got our first investor last week also. It was a crazy time, and moving into due diligence to be on target.com too. So in the past 2 weeks, things have come together. So my first little advice is stick with it, because it will happen, and sometimes it happens really fast. So thanks. I'm excited to be part of this panel.
Love it, Erica. Congrats on all the success. It is not an overnight success. It's over many, many nights that got you to here for sure. And Kevin, I will pass it to you next to share a little bit about your background and where you went to school, what you've been doing since then, and what you're building today.
Brilliant. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Barrow, and I'm the founder of Mark Labs. We're a data analytics company that helps asset managers. Those are the investors that move sometimes hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars at times to integrate the sustainable development goals and other forms of social impact into their investment thesis. I guess in a different world, I would say I was once sitting in the same rooms that you were, but in the virtual world, that's not the case. But I studied at Georgetown, and indeed, the company that I founded was actually founded, on Georgetown's campus. And so, Mike and many others played a role in helping to advise me during those early days. My background, I studied law and business in the UK, where law is an undergraduate degree. I studied at the University of Durham, then went on to Oxford for business school. And when I returned to the United States, so I sought to top everything up with delving a little bit more into finance. And along the way, while working with professors such as Alyssa Lovegrove, Melissa Bradley, it was deeply exposed to how help refine my ideas in terms of how to build this business, in terms of some milestones that that we're pretty proud of. We work with organizations like the United Nations and Gates Foundation on the one hand, and then some of the world's largest financial institutions on the other. So that's pretty exciting. And in the last 2 weeks, we got our first term sheet, which is a major milestone for a startup like ours, and it really helped to put a lot of momentum behind our sales. And happy to speak with you guys about social entrepreneurship, but I guess in sometimes not in the most directive ways, working with institutions that are sometimes known for not being very impactful.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. And thanks for joining us today. Next up, Sunny, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and share a little bit of your origin story.
Sure thing. Thanks, Mike. And great to be on the panel with Kevin and Erica. Such good energy on this panel. Such great things going on. I just feel like this is a wonderful place to be. So I love all the energy. Thank you all for having me today. My name is Sonny Williams. I'm a co-founder at Tiny Docs, where we create health cartoons, which are animated cartoons to educate kids about health in an easy and fun to understand language. So my origin story, when I was a kid, I was in and out of hospitals. I met a lot of doctors who were smart and well-meaning, but not the best communicators, create a lot of stress and anxiety for me. And when I would look to my mom and dad for some sort of help or guidance, all they could offer were hugs and kisses. Although being college educated folks, they weren't equipped with the language to help me understand what was going to happen next either. So I was really in the dark, and I tended to catastrophize things when I didn't know what was going to happen. And 9 times out of 10, someone would hand me a medical brochure to help me understand what was going to happen with my health. And I don't have to belabor the point that a medical brochure isn't the most engaging piece of content to help educate a kid and allay her or his anxiety with regards to health. I grew up to be a healthy young adult. Fast forward years later, where I was trying to figure out how was I going to create impact in the world? Where did my skill sets intersect with the needs of society? And at that time, I heard a similar narrative to friends and family starting families of their own when they would go to the doctor or to the ER, which is smart doctors, well-meaning, still not the best communicators, creating a lot of stress and anxiety for the kid, which then creates even more stress and anxiety for the parents, maybe even tenfold, as if you talk to parents who have gone through a really challenging health situation with regards to their kid. And still, if you go to the ER or the doctor's office, you'll still see it being littered with those medical brochures. And I just thought, why in the world, in this age of this wealth of technology and resources, why are we still using such antiquated methods to educate kids about something so fundamental as their health? And like Erica and Kevin just decided to do something about it. It was near and dear to my heart. It was personal. And so I came up with the idea of creating animated characters to walk kids through various health journeys that kids face. And I didn't have the background to necessarily do it all myself, but I was lucky enough and in the good fortune to be around people who are very smart and creative to help bring this vision to reality. So my first bit of wisdom for you all is that the self-made person is a myth. Joseph Campbell, I respect him greatly, but the hero's journey is a myth when it comes to entrepreneurship. Think of it more of the Avengers. You get some great smart people and surround them, and you combine powers, and then you all together march forward in executing a vision. So I look forward to the conversation today, and I look forward to your questions and learning a little bit more about you and what your ideas are.
Sonny, I love it. And I'm going to remove the spotlight and go back to the grid view where we can see everybody at once now that we got through the intros. A couple of things I want to riff on there. One, is that it's definitely not a solo journey. It takes a lot of support. I love the Avengers analogy. And so I know the pain point you experienced as a child. And so I want to ask each of the panelists, when you were a kid, either in elementary school or middle school, what did you want to be when you grew up? And Sonny, maybe I'll start with you and we can, popcorn around.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to be a doctor.
There we go.
So my parents are immigrants to the United States from Guyana, and we essentially have 3 job opportunities available to us. You can either become a doctor, an engineer, or a failure. And so those are kind of like the solutions that our families give us. And I'm sure anyone who's a first generation American could empathize with that. And so I want to become a doctor, and specifically a neurosurgeon.
All right. Erica, how about you?
I wanted to be a chemist, and so I actually went through and got my chemistry degree, and now I'm not really using that at all, but that's okay.
There you go. I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then they found out I was allergic to dogs and cats and rabbits and like the whole swath of them. So I settled for like computer science video game programmer. Um, anyways, so we started there as as a kid. I'm curious for the panelists, when you got to college, what was one of the best classes you took, and or one of the best professors that was most impactful on you both as a person and perhaps, actually helping you in the work you do now more so than, say, organic chemistry? So Erica, maybe I'll go to you first and then Kevin.
Yeah, I don't. So, okay. So my person that first came to mind is actually a chemist. I worked in her lab and I was just so curious about everything that she was doing. I would like showed up at her office. I was like, please let me work for you. And she was like, okay. And but what really stuck with me and that I tried to do with members of my team now also is like, I wanted to learn and I wanted that experience from her. And she very much welcomed that and allowed me to ask questions and was very patient. So I that's what I got on the spot.
Cool. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, for me, it was actually a study abroad. So I did a service learning program in India where I was working during the day with the Sisters of Charity. So that's the organization that Mother Teresa founded. And at night, I was doing rooftop classes at the University of Calcutta in socioanthropology. And just while I was there, and it really invited me to think about the way that, and it was a series of professors, so it's really kind of like the professors that were part of that program just really invited me to think about how I wanted to be to contribute to the world, and specifically that was where I first started to think about systems change and how to be catalytic in addressing really complex and difficult problems.
And Sunny?
And for me, it was it had nothing to do with entrepreneurship. It was a Professor Banu who taught, he was a political science professor who taught me about the Supreme Court. And what I learned from him, he's a really smart and witty guy. It was just, how do you motivate people to be great? And it, like I said, it had nothing to do with the class. He was just a great motivator and really understood how to get people to kind of unblock themselves to be the best version of themselves. And that's, I mean, I just learned a ton of just being around him and picking his brain. And I would encourage your class, while they're in undergrad or, if they pursue graduate studies, you have carte blanche to reach out. You have such smart people on campus, and you can just reach out as a student and just say, hey, I just want to like learn, or can I get 20 to 30 minutes of your time and just kind of like pick your brain, or I have this idea. Like, they are open to that. That's part of their job, kind of. So take advantage of being around such like a fertile ground of just smart people. You'll be a better person for it. And if you're already pursuing great ideas, your ideas will really take off as well.
Sunny, I think that's a phenomenal idea. And for the students, I'll give you a pro tip. Email anybody who ever went to Georgetown and sign it Hoya Saxa, and they'll do whatever you ask. You say, I'm an undergrad student, I want to learn about this. I think you're really smart. How'd you get into this career? I'll drop a link in the chat a little later about informational interviews with some resources there, and how to kind of tee up those conversations, because everybody wants to help, the next generation. It's how I asked 3 people to be on this panel. They all said yes right away, because they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to help college students. And, Sunny is now doing double duty because he was here for pitch practice, helping some of the folks get ready too. And so for the panelists, I'm curious, which friend or family member has been the most supportive to you along this, we'll say, alternate career path, and how were they able to support you? Feel free to unmute whoever thinks of a friend or family member first.
So I'll go. So like Kevin, I was, prior to starting Tiny Docs, I was a big law attorney in Chicago. And I'm the first, I'm still a licensed attorney. I'm the first attorney in the family. So there was a lot of pushback and questioning whether this was the right path once I decided that this was what I wanted to do. And there wasn't a lot of support initially. In fact, there was a lot of pushback, as I just said. It wasn't until we started getting some traction, blog posts, or you get users to the website, or you get paying customers, that my family actually started to say, oh, wow, this thing kind of has some legs, and the kid's actually onto something. He's not a complete idiot, as my mom is fond to call me. So now I'll say, now that we're relatively established, my mom, who was actually not so supportive initially, is probably Tiny Doc's #1 fan.
I can actually really resonate with that kind of my parents also, because I got my chemistry degree and like had a job offer, and I was like, nah, I'm gonna turn that down and like do this thing that doesn't pay anything. And they're like, what are you doing? So I can resonate with that. I think my greatest supporter was actually, she is a good friend of mine. We met in like the first pitch competition I ever did. And something that's really cool about the social entrepreneurship space that's not true, I don't think, of the not social entrepreneurship space is like, it's really great to celebrate wins with other entrepreneurs who know, like, I'll call my mom when something great happens. She'll be like, that's great, sweetie. But like, she doesn't really know what that means. So like having a friend who's an entrepreneur who knows, what those milestones are, and that can celebrate with you too. It's not a competitive environment, like some other non-social things that I have been a part of, where like people were competing with each other more than celebrating with each other. So like find those people when you're networking, like who can really support you and celebrate with you when you have those wins, instead of like that jealousy. So there's a contrast between kind of like the like I said, the social impact entrepreneurs and the non-social impact.
Definitely. We're playing a positive sum game, not a zero sum game where it's competition. It's a lot more collaboration. Kevin, how about you?
Absolutely. And I have to just echo some of Sunny's points, in the sense that my first job out of business school, my starting salary was greater than both my parents combined when I was growing up. Kind of like towards the end of what was fairly successful careers. And so to kind of like leave that behind and say, oh yeah, I want to start my own business. Not only just start my own business, but a business which just focused on helping people. That sounded kind of like just completely loopy to my family. But just seeing my conviction, and then just they really did get behind. So both my parents did get behind me. But something which Mike has really coached me on over the years is social entrepreneurship in general is a very, very lonely space, and it's in the sense that especially when you're a founder, you are assuming responsibility for everyone who buys into your vision, for your investors, for your clients, for each and every one of your employees and their families. And so it's just like this compounding weight, and the friendship which you ultimately have to develop is a friendship with yourself, right? And really being really big on self-love, support, taking care of oneself, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you of making sure that your business is successful, along with the greater tribe that Erica and Sunny both speak of.
And so thank you everybody for sharing that. I want to do a little bit of a roller coaster ride as we go through this, because now I want to, and you touched on this briefly, but who was the least supportive? And if you don't want to name names, why do you think they were that way? And how did you handle the haters or the, and I dealt with the parental, like, are you fucking crazy? You just got your master's and you graduated from Georgetown and you're quitting a high paying Deloitte job to live at the beach and sell sunglasses. What is wrong with you? I'm still alive, mom and dad, 8 years later, we're doing all right. So, how did you handle the haters or the, people who thought you were crazy, both like handle them directly and, when they're not in the room, deal with the feelings associated with that?
So I'll start off here. I remember I once, and just for context, I think this is a little vignette that helps put things into perspective. I once asked a VC, a venture capitalist, if she had ever invested in a founder that she thought was crazy. And she's like, that is actually a really stupid question. A better question would be, have I ever invested in a founder that I didn't think was crazy? And so this notion that you're going to start a company, be successful, change the world, along the way, like you have to have, you're not a conventional thinker if that's something that you are aspiring to do, right? And so just wanted to put that out there. One person who literally eventually became a champion of the business was a professor who will remain unnamed. I'm not going to even mention the gender. But I went to this professor and I explained what I wanted to do, and was then summarily given every reason why I would not succeed. And I just took notes, went back, did my research, spoke to customers, came back to this said professor, and I was just like, okay, this is the way I've tweaked my business in light of what you shared. And this literally happened over the course of 2 semesters, where I would continuously go to this professor, and you could literally see the professor almost try to avoid me or what have you. And eventually this professor, it got to the point where there were no more rebuttals, and the professor ended up becoming a formal advisor to the business. And so I think that there are times where the craziness and then the resistance that you get is worthy, and or at least coming from a place which is not altogether malicious.
Erica, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on mine already. It was really my dad that was like freaking out because I made the mistake. I showed him the job offer that I got it was at Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico. It was a very nice job offer. And then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this business thing. And it was until I started to get some external validation that he started to come on board. And actually that was true in a lot of cases too. Like a lot of mentors were like, hey, don't, it's risky like that. And I'm from Iowa. I was a very risk intolerant place compared to the coasts. But so I had to be like my own kind of belief system. Like it was me until I could like plant those flags in some external traction and validation, and then people started to come on board. So yeah, it's a challenge at the beginning.
Absolutely. Sunny, how did you overcome some of the doubt?
I think Kevin touched upon it. It's just, it's listening to them, right? Listen, sometimes there are haters, but the haters might be saying something that's truthful. So you can't necessarily just tune them out, because they might be saying something that there might be a pearl of wisdom in there that might get you to change your thinking or shift the way that you're looking at your business. So you have to kind of have some thick skin, or develop that thick skin, and maintain the courage of your convictions to continue on the path, but be thoughtful and reflect on what people are telling you, because sometimes there might be a nugget in there that might help you along your way.
Yeah.
And Kevin also said something also that was really smart, which was you need to have like smart people. This is what I learned. Smart, successful people meet quarterly or have some sort of circle, like clubs that they meet in, or some like informal get-togethers where you just talk about what they're working on or what do they see in the market, what's going on in the world, and creating some sort of like creating those groups is really helpful, personally and professionally. And I'm saying this as a person who came into this late in terms of forming those types of groups and seeing what type of value there is. So start now, start forming those groups of really smart people who are ambitious and want to do great things in the world.
I love it, Sonny. And in class, I'll throw out there too that, you know, our class is going to wrap up soon this semester. I am a resource you have forever. You want to come back in a month or a year or 10 years and say, hey, Professor Malloy, I'm working on this thing. What do you think about it? I will gladly tell you all the things I think is wrong with it, and try to sprinkle in some ideas about questions you should ask in your next set of customer interviews. And, you know, one of the best pieces of feedback I got year one, I was at Deloitte right after undergrad. My manager was giving me feedback and I was pretty defensive. I was like, no, you know, I'm doing this. And he said, Mike, just shut up for a second. And he said, when somebody wants to give you feedback, it's a gift. And you need to receive the gift and smile and nod and say, thank you so much for the feedback. Even if you think it's BS and this guy doesn't know anything, you take it graciously, because as soon as somebody stops giving you feedback, it means they've given up on you. It means they don't think you're going to amount to anything. So they're not even going to waste their time telling you what's wrong with it. So you don't want that to happen. You need to be open and receptive. That's why I try to coach you to be like, oh yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate you asking that, and smile and nod, build the rapport. Or, yeah, thanks for the feedback. Let me go back to the workshop. I'll think about it, and I'll follow up with you to nurture those feedback loops from people who have perhaps seen more in the world and ultimately want you to be successful. They're not trying to tell you your idea is terrible because they want you to go home and cry. They want you to go make it better and give you some motivation to look at it through a new lens. So we're going to ride the roller coaster back up. Kevin, what is one of the highest highs you have ever had as an entrepreneur? We'll go Kevin and then Sonny and then Erica for this one. Bring us to that mountaintop of, wow, this is amazing. I have all the happy chemicals flowing in, and maybe you're, diving into a pool of money. Who knows?
Yeah, oddly enough, I would say that those moments are just scattered throughout. So it's like to try to identify one is very difficult, but one which definitely comes to mind is getting into Techstars, which was really, we were one of 10 companies that were chosen from like 1,500 or something absurd, and it's something that the team had worked together. And so it wasn't the actual event, but it was the process of everything that we went through and sacrifice, and all the late nights, and just having it in you're crystallizing something very specific that was that really kind of said, on the other side of this, you have the potential of becoming a real company. It ended up just being a much longer journey than we expected, but that definitely stands out as being a very powerful moment.
Sonny, how about you? What was the view from one of the mountaintops?
The first user and the feedback. So Avery was undergoing a procedure for a tonsillectomy, and her mom told us, they would go, the first time they went to the doctor's office, she was just, she wouldn't hear anything. She was really upset and crying, and it was hard for her to even calm down and hear what the doctor had to say, or even listen to what her mom had to say to try to allay her fears. And then she learned through word of mouth about Tiny Docs, and they watched it, and she said it was like night and day. It was incredibly helpful. And she and Nora, her mom, said, this is one of the reasons she had a successful health outcome. And that showed this works. And at that time, it was really difficult for me because, you're trying to get validation, and you're trying to show your family like this is a worthy pursuit, and you're showing your law, at this time I'm showing my friends who are practicing law, like, hey, this isn't so completely crazy. But to get that first validation from an actual customer, I mean, it still gives me chills just to share that story, and it probably always will. That was still remains the highest of highs for me.
Love it. That's beautiful. Thank you, Sunny, for sharing. Erica, how about you?
The Kickstarter launch was a pretty high because it was support from kind of like what Sunny was saying. Like I had, you know, a personal network that was really supporting that Kickstarter, and then but as soon as I started to see like our conversions start to come from our Facebook ads and things like that, and have like real people who are excited to use our clothing, like that was pretty awesome. And then that same night I got the term sheet. I was sobbing in this room. I was like, the relief and just the like, oh my god, it's real kind of feeling made everything up to that point absolutely worth it. So that was cool.
I love it. I think we're getting a little contact high just from being in a Zoom room with you, Erica. You know, it's so fresh, and I know that feeling of like, this is real. People believe in it, you know, and I think what you said there is really important, that it makes everything in the rearview mirror worth it. You know, when you're going through hell, keep going. All right. It's you don't want to stop there and park and, you know, take a look around. Just keep pushing forward, and there will be another mountaintop that you know, you're working towards, which is a beautiful segue to a ride down the roller coaster into one of the lowest lows that you have ever had. And Kevin, maybe we'll kick it off to you. And as you're thinking about a low low, I will share one of my own. I once went 128 days with a negative company bank account balance. And for 48 of those days, I had 0 pieces of plastic that worked. None of it worked. If I had 20 bucks, I could pay for parking, I could go out. If I didn't, I stayed home that day. And the fear, the like scarcity mindset, and the just like dark places you talk yourself into, I think is one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs. And, you know, founder depression is for sure a real thing, and having friends to talk about, and sometimes having, you know, therapists or leadership coaches, people to help you work through some of those dips, I think is really important. So Kevin, if you don't mind sharing, you know, a little vulnerability here, what was one of your lowest lows?
Yeah, so our second year into the business, we made a really big bet on doing an ecosystem play in Atlanta. And we had Coca-Cola, Porsche Financial Services, SunTrust, a whole bunch of really big businesses that were like, oh, we love what you do. You know, come to Atlanta, we make it happen. And, you know, so, you know, literally drove down to Atlanta, kind of like, they gave us a little bit of money, but, you know, I preferred to take that money to pay employees rather than pay myself. So I was literally, you know, homeless, like sleeping in the office, right? And we decided to focus entirely on Coca-Cola and won a contract and everything, or it had a contract agreed. And right before signing, they had a change of CEOs, and I think so, like half of the team that was responsible for what I was working on was fired, and the person who had signing authority was fired. And it was just like, you know, overnight we went from having this incredible momentum to almost having nothing, and being back at square one after having made a huge play. And there was this kind of notion of, and with that, you know, several team members became frustrated. Like there were two people I said, you know, I can't do this anymore, and left the company. And it was just seemed like everything was falling apart really rapidly. And, you know, just the process of, you know, consolidating, pulling together energies, really getting everyone to refocus on the vision and what was possible, and moving from there. And so it was like, you know, that notion of finance, your team, team spirit, your confidence in my own decision making and really needing to to figure out a way to pull everything together within a fairly short amount of time. That definitely comes across as one of the lows. I think it was the day where all this happened. I also discovered that the room where I was crashing in had had a family of mice, and I was just like, this just like, how is this day going to possibly get worse? And so yeah, I say that definitely was a low for me.
Sunny or Erica, how low can you go?
Go ahead, Erica.
I haven't had any days that are like quite like suddenly bad, but there was like a period over after, so I turned down my job like a month before COVID hit. And then during that, a bunch of stuff was canceled. All of our shows we were finalists in like 4 pitch events we were going to pitch in, and all of those got canceled. And we had we were working on lining up manufacturing, and over the course of like 7 months we had 3 contracts for manufacturing fall through because the US manufacturing was just hit so hard. So we were working for a couple of months with the third manufacturer, and then we had like, the designs were finalized, everything was ready, we were like negotiating the contract, and then we just got a call one day and they were like, yeah, we're closing our doors, we can't do it anymore. And so we lost so much time and so much runway, that I thought that we weren't gonna make it. And I was like dusting off my resume and I was like, all right, we're gonna and actually it wasn't long after that I got the call from Mike for Halcyon, and I was like, this is a sign, we're gonna keep going. So yeah, but it was looking pretty dire there for a little while.
Thanks for sharing, Erica. Sunny, how about you? And then we're going to open it up for some questions from the students. So if y'all have any questions for one or the whole panelist, let us know.
So early on, pre-revenue, we were invited to present to I won't use his name. He's a very, very famous VC out in California. And we did our pitch, and I should also mention it was for a television show. So they were taping, and he has a school and his students were there as well. And I get the sense we were invited, we had no business being there because the other businesses that were there were much more established and had revenue. And I think we were there to be the butt. And so I got my teeth kicked in. And it was to the point where it didn't feel like he was being critical, he was being really mean because it was going to play well for TV. And I thought at the end, he said, you don't have a business, and I think you should actually enroll in my entrepreneurship school because you are completely lost. And I walked off the stage with my tail between my legs thinking, oh my God, I've sunk this thing. The people who believed in me are going to see on national television that I'm a fraud, this business is a fraud, and we're ruined. We are ruined. But I realized after an hour of just sulking that I never signed the film release. And they called again and again and again, the production company did, say, hey, can you sign that film release? We'd really like to use that footage for TV for the pilot. And I said, nah, no, thank you. So
sorry, dog. Not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen. because I felt like we were invited on false pretenses. We had no chance whatsoever of ever getting funding from this VC. So anyway, learned a lot from that experience, and it was a great learning experience for us, for me specifically, and you go on to fight another day.
Love it. And that the sun does always rise the next day. It's one day at a time. Students, do you guys have any questions? If folks want to use the raise your hand or type them in the chat. I have a couple more that I can run through, but want to create some space if there's any specific ones you all want to ask the panelists about their entrepreneurial experiences. Yeah, Nicholas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicholas. I'm a senior at Georgetown. Thanks so much for coming and speaking about your experiences. I had a question about how, at least maybe in your thinking, or I guess when you're speaking to others, you kind of qualified yourself to do the idea that you did. Because I think as a student, I never know if I know enough to do, X, Y, and Z, especially coming out of college soon. And I know you guys have a unique background, and especially in higher education. So I guess I'm wondering about your experiences, like going to something that, you not only have not had an education in, but I guess you're working with people who maybe already have some of the acumen, and I guess you're trying to fill in the gaps in your knowledge to do what you want to do. Thank you.
So Nicholas, that's a really brilliant question. And I think that part of it, at least for me, is being in love with the problem and really not, and you'll hear this a million times if you haven't already heard this in the class, but love the problem, not your solution, or what have you, because it is that passion and that fervor with which you are willing to make the sacrifices and really learn and see the insights and pull in things from a million different perspectives that's going to ultimately give you the ability to make a breakthrough. But also there's something that, like as human beings, we are, it's almost like we are attracted to people who believe in themselves, right? And who believe that they are, and that have a vision for something, even if it's, just think about how many people, supported Elon Musk before he had anything down, right? It was just, he had this vision, right? And there's something about that really inspires and can create a following. But I would say that, really wanting to solve that problem and then doing the steps that, that both Erica and Sunny and also Mike have alluded to, of learning about the problem, really engaging the potential clients, customers, users, beneficiaries, what have you, surrounding yourself with brilliant people. It's like it's not just you are metonymy for an entire ecosystem or community of enablers that are going to help you eventually solve the problem that you are attempting to solve. And I've saw this so many times at Georgetown, from freshmen who his feet hadn't dried from crossing the Potomac, all the way through to master's students, where they found a problem that they really loved, researched it, saw it from a million different perspectives, spoke to hundreds of people at times, surrounded themselves with brilliant people, and that was the catalyst that they needed to form something and be incredibly successful at doing that. So I'll pass on to Sunny or Erica.
That's great, Kevin. Nicholas, I actually don't think your background is, I mean, it might be helpful, but like Kevin said, if you are really passionate about solving a problem, that I'm sure you have the aptitude to develop the skills that you need in order to attack the problem. I think a really interesting question to ask a child is not necessarily what do you want to be when you grow up, but what kind of problems do you want to solve when you grow up? And for you, I think thinking about it in terms of You know, you might have this way of thinking or training in undergrad that might be helpful, but it's not necessarily, you still can go out and learn new skills to help you attack the problem that you want to solve in your unique way. So, I mean, your undergrad training is great. It's helpful. I don't know what kind of problems you want to solve or what's the big problem that you want to solve, but as long as you attack it with passion and curiosity, you'll put yourself in a really good position to be successful.
I'll piggyback on that and say have a coachable spirit with humility, and like the people who want to give you feedback, eat it up and, you know, go do something and bring it back and you know, look for more of it, because that's how you're going to get better. And also nobody knows what you don't know. Like there is a level of fake it till you make it. And if you think you belong in the room, most people aren't going to, you know, especially online, you know, tell you that you don't belong there. Yeah, Thea.
Cool. Thank you guys so much for being here. And Sunny, thank you again for the pitch practice a few weeks ago. Erica, I wanted to say that I did see your brand on social media a few days ago, so congratulations. It was on my feed and I was like, oh, Professor Malloy said that last week. My question was, are there any specific books that have like changed the course of your lives?
I love that question. And while they're thinking, I'm going to say The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. And your assignment for next week is to watch his literal last lecture video. But that book has deeply, deeply shaped my worldview.
The founder of Backstage Capital wrote a book, and I can't remember the name of it now. Can you find it, Mike? Are you? But it's just a super inspiring story about how she envisioned kind of a future for herself and then became this super successful VC. And it's definitely worth the read.
This is probably not like you're probably expecting a business book or something of the like, but you know, a book that I always return to whenever I'm feeling somewhat overwhelmed is The Little Prince. And you know, and it's, at least for me, it's all about, you know, living authentically. And I think that whatever careers you choose to pursue, but especially you know, in the field of entrepreneurship, to be anything less than your authentic self is just exhausting, and ultimately, you know, undermines, you know, whatever you're attempting. So you know, so that would be it for me. Though behind me, I probably have like about 100 you know the bestsellers in business that I'm an avid reader, but in terms of, you know, my go-to, it'd probably be that.
Books that I was introduced fairly recently, Jonathan Doerr's Measure What Matters. So one smart thing that a friend told me is we don't rise to our goals, but we sink to the level of our systems. So having really good systems in place for yourself and your company are really important, and in order for you to execute on your vision and creating objectives and key results and making that part of the DNA of your company creates that system or a piece of that system in order for you to be really successful. So I highly recommend that. And another one is one that I keep at my desk is Wisdom from the Road Less Traveled. It's a very tiny book that you can get through in one sitting. Like Kevin, it's a book that I return to when I'm feeling kind of lonely, and it kind of reminds me why we are on the path that we're on.
I love it. Thank you, panelists, so much. We're going to wrap up here. Students, I'm going to ask for 2 minutes of bonus time just to give the panelists an, you know, closing advice, not closing arguments, Sonny. We're not being lawyers anymore. Closing advice, any wisdom you want to embark on these students as they're heading into finals, some are graduating, We got freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors in the class. You know, what do you wish you knew when you were 21?
I'd say try everything, test everything. I strongly believe there's no such thing as a relevant experience. So do that thing that you've always wanted to do. Go scuba diving, and trust in the process too. The lulls between progress in entrepreneurship can be long and hard, but there will be those mountains that we talked about.
I would say making yourself, firstly identifying mentors that you believe in and that believe in you, and really using that as a medium of polishing yourself, of saving potentially years or decades of lifetime through learning through their where they have become excellent in their expertise. And yeah, and really ultimately believing in yourselves and setting yourself up for that success that is that can become inevitable.
So there was a time where traveling was actually part of like your learning experience. And now that the world's starting to open up again, take some time to go out and travel, go on adventures, meet new people, get exposed to new ideas, share your ideas with people. And you know, you'll find it fascinating later on when you connect the dots, how many conversations or nuggets of wisdom that you pick up along your adventures, how much that impacts or kind of shapes or molds your thinking about your business and whatever problem you set out to solve. So I also want to say, please consider, like Mike, consider me a resource. Mike, I'm happy to share my email or contact information.
Is it all right with the panelists if I drop your emails in the chat in case students want to follow up?
For sure.
All right. I'll put them in. I got all three of them right there. So class, give a big round of applause to these panelists. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking some time out of your Thursday evening to be with us, to share some wisdom. Always great to be among friends and to introduce my friends to my students. And class, thank you for a wonderful, strange, COVID-filled, Zoom-tastic semester together. Feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions about the final book reports that are due next Thursday. And congrats on a great semester. It's been a lot of fun, and I wish you all the best with finals and whatever the future has in store. Take care.